My daughter handed me a $5 lottery ticket and said, "Happy Father's Day, Dad. If you hit the jackpot, remember half is mine." Then she turned to her stepfather with a smile and gave him a Rolex. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the watch, gleaming, polished, expensive. The kind of gift people give when they want to be remembered. Mine fit in a jacket pocket. His came in a velvet box. What stung the most wasn't the gift itself. It was the message behind it, that I was the charity case, the afterthought, that the man who helped raise her, who picked her up from dance classes, fixed her bike, and worked overtime to pay her college tuition, was now worth $5 and a punchline. And worse, she'd used my money to buy his gift. Quietly drained from my account, the same one I opened for emergencies after her mother left. I smiled anyway. Because that's what you do when you're a father, right? You swallow the pain. You pretend you're not bleeding in front of your child, even when that child has forgotten how to see you. But I would remember everything. Every word, every look, every laugh that wasn't meant for me. And that ticket she tossed like a joke? It was about to rewrite everything. If you've ever been overlooked by the people you love most, then stay with me. This story isn't about revenge, it's about recognition. And the price some people pay for finally being seen. 3 days after Father's Day, I sat alone in my kitchen, the one with the creaky chair and the off-white tiles I'd never gotten around to replacing. Morning light filtered through the curtains, dust floating in it like little ghosts. I had my usual cup of black coffee and my monthly ritual reviewing my bank statement with a pencil and a yellow notepad. 40 years of habit. You learn to track every cent when you've spent most of your life stretching every dollar. Harold Bennett, 68 years old, retired school electrician. I spent 3 decades working maintenance for Asheville's public schools, fixing blown fuses, rewiring light panels, crawling through dusty ceilings to keep the heat running. Quiet work, necessary work. No one remembered your name, but if you didn't show up, nothing worked. I never made a lot, but I never owed much either. I lived simply, bought everything cash. My truck's 20 years old, but it still runs smooth. My house is modest, but I built shelves in every room with my own 2 hands. I take pride in things that last. Madison was the one bright, wild piece of color in my grayscale life. When she was a child, she made me macaroni art with glitter hearts and misspelled, "I love you, Datey," notes that I still have in a drawer. I raised her alone after Eleanor, and I divorced. Her mother wanted a different life, something cleaner, more upscale, less stained by sweat and engine grease. I gave Madison what I could. Nights at the library, afternoons fixing science projects. When college came, I picked up weekend shifts rewiring old churches and small-town diners, just so she wouldn't need loans. I never told her how tight things got. Fathers don't, which is why, when I saw the $15,428.67 charge on my statement labeled Timepiece Reserve, my stomach dropped. I checked the date, the exact day of our Father's Day dinner. At first, I thought it was fraud. Then I remembered Madison still had access to my account. She asked for it years ago, just in case, after her mother left. And I never took her name off. I trusted her. I stared at the charge for a long time. My hand tightened around the coffee mug until it clicked against the ceramic counter. I picked up the phone. "Hey, Dad," she answered. I could hear upbeat music and faint laughter behind her. Shopping again, probably. "Madison," I said, careful with my voice, "did you use my account to buy Richard that watch?" A pause, then casually, "Yeah, I figured you wouldn't mind. I mean, it's not like you were using that money for anything urgent." My chest tightened. That money wasn't a gift. "Dad," she said, shifting into the tone she used when I didn't understand the world anymore. "Richard's done so much for us. He helped with the house, Jake's tuition, even the lake house renovation. You wouldn't even let me throw a real wedding because of budget. He deserved something meaningful." I tried to breathe evenly. "You didn't ask me, Madison." "Because you would have said no," her voice snapped. "This wasn't selfish, it was symbolic. Richard's what a father should be." And there it was. Not just the theft, not just the betrayal, the erasure. I hung up before my voice could crack. I didn't want her to hear it. The grief. She hadn't just taken my money. She'd taken me out of the equation. As if all the years of work, worry, and sacrifice had evaporated. as if the man who fixed her flat tires and stayed up until 2 a.m. teaching her geometry had become unnecessary, replaceable. That night, I sat in my living room, the same one where she used to build blanket forts and watch Saturday cartoons. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't read a book. I just stared at the dark window, wondering how a man could raise a daughter with his whole heart and still lose her piece by piece. The silence in my house that night wasn't new, but this time it felt heavier, like it had shape, like it was sitting across from me at the table, waiting for me to say something. I stared at the shadows on the wall, and my thoughts drifted to Eleanor. She wasn't cruel, not exactly, just tired of smallness, tired of counting coupons and cutting leftovers into neat plastic containers. She taught second grade, came from a family where dinner meant real silverware and Sunday meant country clubs. When we met, she called me salt of the earth, and I thought it was a compliment. I didn't know it was a warning. The cracks started early. She hated the smell of oil on my clothes, called my hands permanently dirty. When we'd walk through the nicer part of town, she'd point out houses with wraparound porches and ask, "Don't you ever want more, Harold?" I did, but not the kind she meant. Madison was 6 when Eleanor packed up her car and drove off. No big fight, no shouting match. Just a quiet Sunday morning and a folded letter on the kitchen table. But Madison stayed with me. Eleanor said she needed a life that matched her ambition, and raising a daughter alone didn't fit that picture. I didn't fight her decision. I was too stunned, too busy making breakfast for a child who suddenly became my entire world. I raised Madison through every school concert, every scraped knee, every late-night stomach bug. I was there when she lost her first tooth, and when she got her acceptance letter to college. She was my reason, my anchor, my girl. She loved simple things back then: story time at the library, pancake Saturdays, the smell of sawdust when I built her a bookshelf shaped like a castle. I didn't have a lot, but what I gave with everything I had. But college changed her. It was there that she met Richard Slater, Eleanor's new husband, a man 20 years her senior. He wasn't her professor or classmate. He was a guest speaker at a business seminar, a senior partner at a high-end real estate consulting firm, wealthy, suave, everything Eleanor wanted and found, everything Madison suddenly admired. They reconnected. Madison started spending more time at their place at first on weekends, then for entire school breaks. A luxury condo in Charlotte, floor-to-ceiling windows, wine racks, imported art. Eleanor and Richard welcomed her in like a project, polishing her into someone who could belong in that world. To Madison, Richard wasn't just a stepfather. He was proof that success didn't look like worn-out jeans and calloused hands. He was the man with answers, investments, and influence. I saw the shift almost immediately. She came home less, stopped calling me Dad, and started saying Harold in emails. She wrinkled her nose at the couch fabric. Asked why I didn't just upgrade my lifestyle. One time she said, "You should take notes from Richard. He really understands value." That one stuck with me for years. Still, I gave what I could. When she needed help covering books, I sent a check. When her laptop died, I sold my backup generator to buy her a new one. When she graduated, I sat alone in the back row because her seat was reserved for Eleanor and Richard. After the ceremony, she hugged them first. She barely looked at me. And now, years later, she had drained my account to buy Richard a Rolex. She didn't ask, didn't hesitate, because somewhere along the way, I'd been edited out of the picture. Not with malice, but with indifference. The kind that hurts more because it doesn't even come with hate. The saddest part? I still would have said yes if she'd only asked me first. It's strange how quickly reality can tilt, how one morning you wake up an invisible old man, and by noon your entire life has shifted because of a joke. The morning after that call with Madison, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, bank statement still open, the same line item circled in red pen over and over again. Timepiece reserve, $15,428.67. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up. Lawn mowers, dogs barking. Someone across the street was pulling weeds in pajamas. But my world had stalled. Everything felt like static. My eyes landed on the ticket. It had been sitting on the counter, near the old fruit bowl. The $5 scratch-off Madison gave me mockingly, half joking, a filler gift. I hadn't even scratched it yet. It felt ridiculous now, like a cruel punchline. But maybe, I thought, maybe this dumb little thing will at least make me laugh. I grabbed a quarter from the junk drawer and scratched the first row, then the second, then the third. Nothing. And then I hit the last row. The symbols didn't make sense at first, 3 stacks of gold bars. I squinted at the winning combos key on the back. 3 stacks equals jackpot. I checked again. Checked a third time. I blinked. My hands started to shake. I reached for my phone and typed the code into the state lottery website. The screen loaded. The numbers matched. My breath caught in my throat. $95 million. I sat back in the chair, heart pounding. The house was silent again, but this time it buzzed with something else. Not joy, not excitement, just disbelief. A part of me thought maybe I was dreaming, or dead, or both. I walked around the kitchen 3 times, touched the walls, looked at the old calendar still stuck on April. The fridge was humming louder than usual. Everything felt too real and too fake at once. I didn't yell, didn't cheer. I just sat down, ticket in hand, and stared out the window. Madison had given me that ticket. A $5 joke, a placeholder next to a Rolex, and now it was worth nearly $100 million. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did neither. I made coffee instead. The bitter smell grounded me. I took the ticket to the dining room table and set it down like it might explode. Then I picked up my notepad and started writing numbers. Half after taxes. What would that be? 45? Maybe 50? I wasn't thinking about yachts or private jets. I thought about replacing the front steps, getting the roof redone, maybe restoring my old truck, the one with the rust creeping up like ivy. And then, of course, came the thought I didn't want to have. Should I tell Madison? My hand froze. She had stolen from me. Not just money, but trust. She had siphoned my account like it was her inheritance. Gave a man who barely knew me a Rolex. Mocked me to my face with a lottery ticket. And now that very same ticket might become her golden lifeline if I let it. I stared at it for a long time. Somewhere in that silence, I remembered her laugh at dinner. How she had said, "If you win big, half is mine," with a wink. Everyone laughed. Except me. And now? She might actually expect it. I put the ticket in a Ziploc bag, then slipped it between the pages of my old repair manual for electrical systems. No one had touched that book in years, not even me. For the rest of the day, I didn't move much. I read the claim procedures online. I researched whether I could stay anonymous. I checked the ticket again and again. By evening, the sun was setting in long amber lines across the linoleum floor. I sat on the porch, a beer in hand, the air thick with midsummer heat. The lottery ticket inside that house was humming like a live wire. My world had changed, and no one else knew yet, especially not the person who needed to learn the hardest lesson, because this time I wasn't giving away anything, not out of spite, but because maybe, just maybe, I was finally done being invisible. It started with a Facebook post, a week after I claimed the winnings quietly, anonymously, just like I'd planned. My phone started buzzing nonstop. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, notifications piling up like digital storm clouds. I ignored them at first, thought it was spam. But then my neighbor, Janice, knocked on my door with a frown I'd never seen before. "Harold, is it true?" I had no idea what she meant. She held out her phone, and there it was. Madison's face perfectly lit, her makeup just right, her voice trembling with just enough hurt to feel real. "Hi, everyone," she said into the camera. "I never thought I'd have to do this, but I can't stay silent anymore. My father, Harold Bennett, stole a lottery ticket that was meant as a gift, a shared gesture between family. We agreed it would be split, but he cashed it secretly, cut me out entirely, after everything I've done for him." She paused, swallowed theatrically. "This isn't about money. It's about betrayal, about emotional abuse, about growing up with a man who made me feel small, guilty, unworthy, and now he's a millionaire and pretending I don't exist." I froze. It got worse. He may have raised me, but not with love, with control, with guilt tripping, with lectures about earning everything, while never once asking how I felt. The video ended with her looking straight into the camera. This isn't just my story. It's the story of many children who've been used, silenced, and then discarded by the very people who were supposed to protect them. Please share if you believe children deserve better. It had over 48,000 shares in 2 days. The comment section was a minefield. Disgusting. Classic old man greed. These boomers get rich and forget who sacrificed for them. Then came Richard. He posted a polished LinkedIn article titled, "Inheritance and Integrity: Why Families Should Come Before Fortune." He never mentioned my name directly, but the implication was sharp as glass. When older generations prioritize control over compassion, they damage not just family ties but legacy itself. I've seen firsthand what happens when emotional wounds are buried under piles of cash. I hadn't said a word publicly. Not one. But it didn't matter. The court of public opinion had convened, and I was already guilty. My voicemail was flooded. Reporters left notes at my door. A neighbor I'd helped fix a fence for last spring crossed the street when I waved. Even the church I'd volunteered with for years sent a neutrality statement asking me to respect community peace. I sat on my porch one night, alone, the ticket long since claimed, the money untouched, and watched a group of teenagers ride by on bikes. One of them threw a crumpled soda can at my mailbox. "Nice Rolex, thief," he shouted. The others laughed. I didn't wear a watch. I didn't wear anything new. And still, somehow, I had become the villain of a story I hadn't written. For 2 weeks, I didn't leave the house unless I had to. Grocery trips became midnight runs. I stopped answering the phone. The mail piled up unopened. Even the neighbor's dog, who used to wag his tail at me, now growled behind the fence. I thought silence would protect me. That time would settle things. But silence had only made me invisible. And now, it was time to speak. It began with an envelope on my porch. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, Harold, written in small, careful cursive. Inside was a business card. Linda Slater, Esquire, elder law specialist, retired. Sometimes silence isn't safe. And beneath it, a handwritten note. "I know what they're doing. You're not alone. Call me." The name hit me, like a gust of cold air. Slater, Richard's ex-wife. We met 2 days later, at a roadside diner just outside town. Neutral ground. She wore a gray wool blazer, her eyes sharp and her voice quieter than I expected, but every word was deliberate. "I was married to Richard for 12 years, she said, "and I watched him destroy people, always with charm, always through other people's hands." She opened a folder and laid out photos, court transcripts, old articles. Families torn apart, seniors manipulated into signing things they didn't understand. And always, always, Richard walks away clean, letting others take the blame while he plays savior. She looked at me. "He's doing the same thing now with your daughter." I clenched my fists. "And she doesn't even see it." "She will," Linda said. "If you speak, publicly, clearly, with proof." I paused. "What proof?" She slid over a printed screenshot. A bank authorization document. Madison's name. The Rolex purchase. Pulled directly from the card she had linked to my account years ago. "She took your money. Without consent. That's theft, Harold. Whether she calls it symbolic or not." And then she handed me something else. A short letter. Just 3 paragraphs. "My name is Harold Bennett. I've been silent out of love. Out of dignity. But silence, I've learned, can be twisted. So here's the truth. It was raw, simple, and it was mine. That night, I posted the letter on my personal Facebook page. No hashtags, no theatrics, just a quiet truth, and a scanned image of the purchase record with Madison's authorization highlighted in yellow. I didn't expect much. But the next morning my inbox looked different. Some messages still called me names, but others apologized. "I'm sorry I judged you." I believed her. I didn't think to question it. "I went through something similar with my son. Thank you for speaking." The tide was turning. Even local news picked it up. Lottery winner breaks silence. A father's side of the story. Richard stayed quiet. So did Madison. No live video. No hashtag. Just silence from the people who used to speak the loudest. And that silence? It was louder than anything they'd ever said. The ballroom was colder than I expected. A chandelier glittered overhead like it belonged in another lifetime. Everything was white tablecloths, crystal glasses, manicured applause. The kind of place you dress for, not belong to. My blazer itched. My tie felt too tight. But I stood still near the back, watching as they called out names, passed oversized checks, and posed for cameras. Then the speaker cleared her throat and smiled into the mic. And now, please welcome the winner of the $95 million Power Gold jackpot, Mr. Harold Bennett. Polite applause swelled. Lights turned. Cameras clicked. I walked to the stage slowly, check in hand, ears full of static. I felt like a background extra in someone else's movie, but every step I took felt heavier and more certain. And then I saw her, Madison, dressed in sharp red, cutting through the crowd like a blade, not walking, charging. Eyes locked on me, fury thinly veiled behind foundation and high heels. "Dad," she shouted, loud enough to silence the room. "We need to talk. Right now." Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the jazz trio stopped playing. Security tensed. The woman at the mic faltered. Flashes from phones began to pop like popcorn. Madison climbed halfway onto the stage steps, pointing. "You told me we'd split it. That ticket was our joke, our tradition. You stole it?" Gasps swept through the room. Somewhere in the back, Richard Slater appeared cool, composed, his arm raised to hush someone behind him. A man who looked like he owned the silence he walked in. "He's lying," Madison continued. "He's twisting everything. He's been doing this for years. Guilt-tripping me, controlling me. Now he wins and suddenly I'm the villain?" Security moved toward her, gently placing hands on her shoulders. She pulled back. "Don't touch me. I have a right to speak." Her voice cracked not just with anger, but desperation. I stepped toward the podium. Slowly. Deliberately. I leaned into the mic, my hand gripping the edge like a man holding on to the last edge of dignity. "Sometimes," I said, "you give trash expecting it to rot. But fate has a sense of humor. A wave of murmurs." My daughter gave me a $5 scratch-off ticket. It wasn't meant as a gift, it was a placeholder, a joke, a reminder that, in her world, I was worth $5. Oh. That same day she gave her stepfather, who never changed her diapers, never stayed up all night through flu season, never built a bookshelf shaped like a castle, a Rolex, bought with my money. All eyes turned to Madison, her expression twisted. She drained my bank account, quietly, efficiently, like I was just a forgotten old man she could invoice later. Someone near the stage gasped. One of the reporters raised a hand, asking silently to record. I nodded. So yes, I scratched that ticket. I won. Not just money, but clarity. And since then, I've been called greedy, controlling, abusive. I turned to face Madison fully. But you see, abuse isn't just shouting. Sometimes it's rewriting history until no one remembers what really happened. Richard stepped forward, ready to interrupt, but this time, security blocked him. The crowd noticed. "This money," I said, lifting the check slowly, "was never a reward. It's a revelation. It showed me who clapped for me when I had nothing, and who demanded pieces of me when I finally had something." I paused. "It's about dignity, not revenge. And if that sounds dramatic to you, ask yourself why it bothers you so much that an old man finally said, 'Enough.'" Silence. Thick. Cold. And then, applause. It started soft, one or two hands, then louder, then rising into a standing ovation that swept the room. But not for Madison. For me, Madison stood frozen, her face slack with disbelief. Then, as the clapping grew louder, she shouted into the void. "You're all blind. You don't know what he's like. He's a fraud, a manipulator. I'm the victim here." Security moved in again, this time firmly. She tried to pull free. "This isn't over. You owe me. You owe me." She was escorted out, heels clacking, voice echoing, a dozen lenses following her fall in real time. Richard didn't follow. He stood back, jaw tight, fingers twitching. One reporter shouted, "Mr. Slater, is it true you manipulated another senior citizen in a similar case 10 years ago?" He didn't answer. The flash from cameras now aimed at him. Later in the lobby, people patted my back, shook my hand, apologized. A woman whispered, "My daughter's just like that. I'm sorry you had to go through it. A man in a tailored suit said, "That was the best speech I've ever heard at this event." I didn't say much, just smiled, nodded. Outside, night had fallen, but it felt like morning. Back in the parking lot, I looked at the ceremonial check one last time, not as a prize, but as a symbol. Not of luck, but of survival. 3 months later, I didn't recognize my own life. The noise had died down. No more reporters outside my house. No more online debates dissecting every sentence I'd ever said. No more neighbors peeking through curtains. Just air. Clean, quiet mountain air. I'd moved, packed up everything I cared to bring mostly old tools, some photos, and a few shirts, and bought a modest home in Hendersonville, the town where I was born but hadn't stepped foot in for over 30 years. Nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, it felt like starting over. But I hadn't come here to disappear. I came here to rebuild. The first thing I did was track down an old building on the edge of town, an abandoned auto garage I remembered riding past as a kid. It had rust on the roof and weeds in the driveway, but the bones were solid. I bought it. I didn't need the money. I needed the work. A few weeks later, I stood in the center of the garage with fresh paint on my hands and the echo of old engines in my ears. The sign above the entrance read, "Bennett's Hands, Tools, Trust, and Second Chances." But it wasn't just for fixing trucks anymore. I opened a small foundation using part of the lottery money, a grant fund, for single parents who were trying to do the best they could with what little they had. Free repairs, childcare support, scholarships for trade schools, rent emergencies. People told me I was being too generous. They didn't understand. This wasn't charity. It was clarity. I knew what it felt like to stretch a dollar until it snapped. I knew what it meant to stand alone in a world that rewarded noise and punished humility. I knew how rare it was for someone to ask, "Are you okay?" without a form to fill. So I built the kind of place I'd once needed. One morning, I was under the hood of a rusty pickup when I heard the front door chime. I wiped my hands and stepped into the office, and froze. Eleanor. She stood there, smaller than I remembered, but still elegant. Hair in a neat bun, shoes too polished for gravel. In her hands was a bouquet of white lilies, too formal, too careful. "Harold," she said softly. I nodded. "Eleanor, a pause." She looked around the room. Her eyes landed on a photo on the wall, me and Madison, taken when she was 8, both of us grinning with chocolate smeared on our cheeks. "You kept that," she said. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "I saw everything," she said. "The video, the gala, the letter." Her voice cracked. She swallowed. "I owe you an apology." My stomach tightened. She went on. "Not just for what happened with Madison, but for everything. For leaving. For judging you. For thinking silence meant weakness." She placed the flowers on the counter. "I spent so long chasing more," she whispered, "and all I found was loneliness that smelled like perfume and regret." We stood there in silence, surrounded by oil-stained floors and second chances. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just needed to say it, out loud, before it's too late." I nodded slowly. "Thank you." She lingered for a second, then turned, heels clicking softly, and disappeared back into the sun. I never saw her again. And as for Madison, she never called, never wrote, never emailed. And I didn't chase her. Some wounds take longer to close than others. Some don't close at all. But they scar over, eventually. They stop bleeding. I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain. But I no longer carry her absence like a punishment. I've learned that healing isn't always reunion. Sometimes it's just peace. Every Saturday now, the shop runs quiet, and I make lunch for the volunteers, a grilled cheese and soup kind of meal, the kind that fills you without flash. We sit on the back patio. The mountains stretch endlessly behind us. Kids run through the yard, chasing each other between rows of donated bicycles and tire stacks. I fix what I can, listen when needed, speak only when it adds something worth saying. Sometimes people still ask me, "So what'd you do with the rest of the money?" I smile. "I gave some away, used some to build this. And the rest?" I nod toward the mountains. I bought my silence back, and for the first time in my life, I kept it. What do you do when the people you love most stop seeing you? That's the question I've carried, quietly, beneath all the noise, money, and headlines. This was never just a lottery story, not a courtroom drama, not a clickbait scandal. This was, and always will be, a family story. A story about a father who tried his best with what little he had, a daughter who lost her way, a system that rewards spectacle but ignores silent sacrifice. In the end, money didn't fix anything, but grace did. It was the grace to forgive those who never apologized, the grace to accept that not every chapter needs closure, the grace to start over even if it means starting alone. And that grace? It didn't come from within. It came from God. I don't say that lightly. I say it because in the quietest moments, when the noise died down and the pain sat loud in my chest, it was the presence of the Lord that gave me peace. Not wealth, not recognition, just faith. In the face of betrayal, God reminded me, "You are not invisible to me." In the storm of public shame, He whispered, "Stay still, I will fight for you." And when the world pointed fingers and turned away, His arms remained open. I used to think fatherhood was about providing. Now I know it's about remaining. Remaining kind when it's not returned. Remaining hopeful when the door stays shut. Remaining faithful to your values, to your vows, to your Father in heaven. This is not just my story. This is every quiet man's story. Every worn-out mother's story. Every misunderstood parent's story. This is a family story. And if you've ever felt unseen by your own children, misunderstood by your own blood, or betrayed by the ones you loved most, know this. God sees you. God hears you. God keeps the receipts the world forgets. Maybe Madison will come back one day. Maybe she won't. But the man I've become no longer waits to be validated by a phone call. He builds. He helps. He believes. And if you take nothing else from this journey, take this. Ties of blood are fragile. But ties of grace? They endure. Let your story be told with dignity. Let your pain be seen as a lesson. Let your healing be a testimony. Because no matter how broken things get, every family story deserves redemption. If this story touched you in any way, share it. Somewhere, someone is going through the same silent heartbreak, and they need to know they're not alone. Share this family story. Speak love. Stay faithful.